Each year in Canada, tens of thousands of criminal investigations begin quietly, long before they become headlines. Most are resolved, some are not. Our podcast examines the evidence, the legal thresholds, and the decisions that shape what happens next. This is Northern Dark, True Canadian Crime. Documented, structured, and examined without noise. Just after 1 o'clock in the morning, on October 18th, 2008, 24-year-old Amber McFarland steps out of the Cat and Fiddle nightclub in Portage la Prairie, Manitoba. Surveillance footage from the hotel's beer vendor captures her leaving with two men. One is her ex-boyfriend, Kelly Garrioch, the same man she had an active no-contact order against. The second is an acquaintance. Amber gets into their vehicle. Her own car remains parked at Canada Inns. That is the last time anyone ever sees her. In the hours and days that followed, she vanished completely. No phone activity, no bank transactions, no contact with anyone. Mountie investigators would later reclassify her disappearance as a homicide. 17 years later, they are certain she was murdered. What they still don't know is exactly what happened after she got into that vehicle, or where it happened. This is the story of Amber McFarland's last ride out of Portage. Amber Lynn McFarland was 24 years old when she disappeared from Portage la Prairie, Manitoba in October 2008. Family was at the very center of Amber's world. Above all, she shared an exceptionally close bond with her identical twin sister, Ashley. From the moment they were born, Amber and Ashley were inseparable. They grew up together, first in Minnesota before the family moved to Portage. Those who knew them described the twins as having that rare, almost intuitive connection that only identical twins can truly understand, finishing each other's sentences, sharing the same sense of humor, and sensing when the other was happy or upset without needing to say a word. She was a young woman who seemed to be building a stable, ordinary life in the tight-knit prairie community where she had grown up. Amber worked as a retail clerk at Mark's Work Warehouse in Portage. She had been there long enough to earn a recent raise, and co-workers remembered her as reliable, friendly, and someone who brought genuine positive energy to the store floor. She was known for her bright smile, her outgoing nature, and her ability to make people laugh even during a routine workday. Their mother, Lori, has spoken about how the two sisters were in nearly constant communication. Amber and Ashley spoke or texted every single day, often multiple times. They leaned on each other through life's challenges and celebrated the good moments together. Their bond went far beyond typical sisterhood. It was a deep emotional anchor for both of them. Amber also had another sister, Lisa, and belonged to a large extended family that remained actively involved in her daily life. But the twin connection with Ashley was uniquely profound. Her mother later described Amber as beautiful inside and out, vibrant, full of life, and someone who was loving and deeply loved in return. Amber had a feisty spirit and was considered a fighter by those closest to her. She loved fashion and style, and her long-term dream was to become an interior decorator, something her mother believed she would have excelled at. Friends recalled her as a free spirit who was always smiling, cracking jokes, and lighting up whatever room she walked into. She was the kind of person who would do anything for a friend, yet she remained responsible and grounded. By all accounts, Amber was sociable and enjoyed spending time with friends, but she balanced that social side with a steady, dependable lifestyle. She maintained consistent employment, kept regular contact with her family, and had no known history of running away or cutting ties with the people who cared about her. On Friday, October 17, 2008, Amber's day followed a completely familiar pattern. She had traveled to Winnipeg for a work-related training session and returned to Portage in the late afternoon. Nothing in her behavior that day raised any concerns whatsoever. To everyone around her, it was just another normal Friday. In every measurable way, Amber did not fit the profile of someone who would voluntarily walk away from her life. She had a job she was succeeding in, a close and loving family, especially that unbreakable twin bond with Ashley, and deep roots in the Portage community. She was simply a 24-year-old woman living her life, until the early hours of October 18th changed everything. The evening of Friday, October 17th, 2008, began like many other nights out in Portage. Amber met up with friends and started her evening at Smitty's Lounge. From there, the group moved on to Canada Inns, a popular local hotel and gathering spot. Later in the night, they ended up at the Cat and Fiddle nightclub, located inside the Midtown Motor Inn in the downtown area. By all reports, Amber was in good spirits and enjoying the night with the people she was with. Around 1 a.m. on Saturday, October 18th, surveillance cameras at the Midtown Motor Inn's beer vendor captured Amber's final confirmed moments. She is seen standing at the counter, then walking out of the buildings with two men. One of those men was Kelly Colin Garrioch, her ex-boyfriend. The other was a male acquaintance. Amber gets into a vehicle with them and leaves the immediate area. Importantly, her own car remained parked where she had left it earlier that night, at Canada Inns. She did not return to it. She did not drive herself home. She simply drove off with the two men. She was wearing a black sweater and blue jeans. That is the last visual record of Amber. After she climbed into that vehicle and the taillights disappeared down the street, every trace of her stopped. No one saw her again. No one spoke to her again. And in the hours, days, and weeks that followed, there would be no phone calls, no text messages, no bank machine withdrawals, and no debit or credit card use. Nothing that would indicate she was still moving through the world. This was not a gradual fading away. It was an abrupt and complete disappearance within hours of her last confirmed sighting on video, in a small city where people generally know one another and where late-night activity is limited. What happened in the minutes and hours after Amber got into that vehicle remains the central unanswered question of this case. What happened next, or rather, what didn't happen, is what immediately set this case apart from a typical missing person report and turned concern into alarm. Amber did not return to her car at Canada Inns that night. She did not drive herself home. She did not send a single text or make a phone call to let anyone know she was staying out later than expected or crashing at someone else's place. When Saturday morning came, Amber simply failed to show up for her scheduled shifts at Mark's work warehouse. For a responsible young woman who had just received a raise and took pride in her job, going completely silent and missing work without any explanation was entirely out of character. As the hours turned into days, the silence became deafening. There were no outgoing calls from her cell phone. No incoming calls were answered. No text messages were sent or received. Her bank accounts and debit cards showed zero activity, not a single withdrawal, purchase, balance check, or even an attempted transaction. In 2008, before smartphones and constant connectivity became the norm, a 24-year-old like Amber still relied heavily on her phone to stay in touch with friends, family, and work. The complete digital blackout was highly unusual and deeply troubling. Family and friends began reaching out frantically, their concern growing with every unanswered message and unreturned call. Her mother, Lori, and her identical twin sister, Ashley, knew almost immediately that something was terribly wrong. Given how close Amber and Ashley were, speaking or texting multiple times every single day, the sudden absence of any contact from Amber was completely out of the ordinary. This was not Amber. She didn't disappear from her own life. She didn't ignore her family. She didn't abandon her job or leave her loved ones wondering where she was. The worry quickly spread through their large, extended family. People who knew Amber began checking with mutual friends and driving around Portage looking for any sign of her. The more time that passed without a single word, the heavier the dread became. Police were notified relatively quickly. At first, her disappearance was treated as a standard missing person case, which is normal procedure for an adult. But investigators soon noticed the same troubling pattern that had alarmed her family. A young woman with strong ties to her community, steady employment, no known personal crises, financial stability, and a sudden, total cessation of all normal life activity. In law enforcement terms, this combination, leaving a bar with individuals under questionable circumstances and then vanishing without any digital or financial footprint, raised immediate and serious concerns that this was not voluntary. The first irregular detail, then, wasn't a dramatic event caught on camera. It was the profound and immediate absence of everything that should have followed a normal night out: contact, movement, basic life signals, and simple communication. That complete and unnatural silence spoke volumes. It told investigators, and later the public, that whatever occurred after Amber got into that vehicle was almost certainly not of her own choosing. Once Amber was reported missing, the Mounties in Portage launched what would become one of the most thorough and extensive investigations in the region in recent memory. Initially, her case was handled as a standard missing person investigation. Officers began interviewing friends, family members, and anyone who had seen or spoken with Amber that night. They collected and reviewed surveillance footage from the Cat and Fiddle nightclub, the Midtown Motor Inn, and surrounding businesses. They carefully traced her last known movements and conducted detailed interviews with the two men she had last been seen with. But as days passed with no contact, no financial activity, and no credible sightings, the tone of the investigation shifted dramatically. In 2009, the police officially reclassified Amber's disappearance as a homicide investigation. This was a significant and relatively rare step to take without a body, but it reflected the strong circumstantial evidence suggesting foul play. A central focus of the investigation quickly became Kelly Garrioch, Amber's 38-year-old ex-boyfriend. Kelly and Amber had been in an on-again, off-again relationship that ended earlier in 2008. In May of that year, Amber obtained a formal no-contact order against him after reporting an alleged assault. That court-ordered protection was still fully in effect on the night she disappeared. Making the situation even more serious was the fact that Amber was scheduled to testify against Kelly in provincial court on November 18, 2008, just 1 month later. Police closely examined whether this upcoming testimony, combined with the active no-contact order, could have provided a motive. Investigators also focused on the second man seen with Amber that night, Graham Saxon, a 40-year-old acquaintance from Portage and a friend of Kelly's. Graham later stated that he drove both Amber and Kelly to Kelly's residence on Yellow Quill Trail after they left the beer vendor, dropped them off, and then went home himself. He voluntarily submitted to and passed a polygraph examination administered by the Mounties. Both men were interviewed multiple times. In July 2009, Kelly and Graham were arrested and brought in for extensive questioning. Search warrants were executed on properties connected to Kelly, including his home on Yellow Quill Trail. Forensic teams spent more than 10 hours at the residence, including excavating portions of the backyard in a search for evidence or remains. Police also executed a search warrant at Graham's home. Officers conducted ground searches in rural areas around Portage, reviewed additional video footage from across the town, and followed up on dozens of tips from the public. Despite these extensive efforts, no physical evidence directly linking anyone to Amber's disappearance or presumed death was ever recovered. No charges have ever been laid in connection with her homicide. Kelly has consistently denied any involvement in her disappearance, describing the intense scrutiny placed on him as having made his life horrid. 17 years later, the Mounties Major Crime Services Unit still considers this an active homicide file. The lack of a body and the absence of a confirmed crime scene continue to present major challenges for investigators. Without physical remains or a clearly identified location where an offense occurred, forensic analysis and reconstruction have been extremely limited. The investigation has relied heavily on witness statements, timelines, video evidence, and circumstantial details, all of which point to a tragic outcome, but none of which have yet produced the breakthrough needed to bring the case before the courts. 17 years after Amber vanished, many questions still linger, not because investigators lack direction, but because several critical pieces of the puzzle have never been found. The most fundamental and haunting unknown is this: what exactly happened in the minutes and hours after Amber climbed into that vehicle outside the Cat and Fiddle nightclub? Who made the decisions that night? What route did the vehicle take once it left the Midtown Motor Inn? Did Amber ever make it to another location? Or did events unfold quickly? And at what point did her life tragically end? Closely connected to that mystery is the complete absence of a confirmed crime scene. In most homicide investigations, police are eventually able to identify a location where physical evidence can be gathered: blood, DNA, personal belongings, signs of a struggle, or discarded items. In Amber's case, that vital physical anchor has never been identified. Without a known scene, Forensic experts have been unable to apply the full range of modern investigative techniques that often crack cold cases: detailed soil analysis, insect evidence, blood spatter reconstruction, digital mapping of movements, or advanced trace evidence collection. This has kept the entire investigation in a frustratingly circumstantial realm. Equally significant is the fact that Amber's remains have never been recovered. This absence has prevented authorities from determining a precise cause of death, estimating a more accurate time of death, or gathering trace evidence that might link a specific individual to the crime. For her family, particularly her mother Lori and her twin sister Ashley, it has meant they have been denied even the basic closure of a proper burial and the chance to say goodbye in a tangible, meaningful way. The uncertainty continues to weigh heavily on them more than 17 years later. These gaps are not minor details. They represent the structural limitations that have kept this case from being solved. Investigators have long held the strong belief that Amber was murdered, yet the physical proof that would stand up strongly in a courtroom has remained elusive. The passage of time has only made the challenge greater. Memories fade, potential witnesses move away or pass on, and any physical evidence that might have existed in the open becomes significantly harder to recover or interpret. Still, what keeps this case active and alive is the quiet confidence shared by investigators and those closest to Amber that someone, somewhere, still holds the missing pieces. It could be a conversation overheard years ago that suddenly takes on new meaning, an unusual sight or sound that seemed insignificant at the time, a vehicle that was spotted in an unexpected place, or someone who has carried the weight of knowledge for far too long. In tight-knit communities like Portage la Prairie, secrets rarely stay buried forever. Until those final details surface, Amber's story remains suspended, caught between what is known and what may never be spoken aloud. Amber McFarland was only 24 years old when she disappeared from the streets of Portage. She was a daughter, a twin sister, a granddaughter, a co-worker, and a friend to many. She was someone who smiled easily, cared deeply for her family, and was simply trying to live her life in the community she called home. 17 years later, her story remains one of Manitoba's most haunting unsolved homicides. Not because there is any doubt about what happened to her. Investigators have long concluded she was the victim of foul play, but because the final chapter of that night has never been written. The vehicle drove away, and with it went answers that her family and this community still desperately seek. For Amber's mother, Lori, and her twin sister, Ashley, the pain has not diminished with time. The empty chair at family gatherings, the missed milestones, the unanswered questions, these are carried every single day. They, along with the rest of Amber's loved ones, continue to live with a loss that has no resolution, only a permanent absence where a vibrant young woman should still be. This case stands as a sobering reminder of how quickly an ordinary night out can change everything. It also highlights the limitations investigators face when a body is never found and a crime scene is never clearly identified. Yet, despite those obstacles, the file remains active. The Mounties have not closed it, and they continue to welcome any new information, no matter how small it may seem. If you were in Portage that night in October 2008, if you saw or heard something that didn't make sense at the time, or if you have carried a piece of this story for years, now is the time to come forward. Someone knows what happened after Amber got into that vehicle. Someone knows where she was taken, and someone, somewhere, holds the key that could finally bring answers to her family. Amber deserves to be remembered, not just as a cold case statistic, but as the young woman who was taken far too soon. A daughter who loved her family, a sister who shared a special bond, and a person who mattered. Her story is not over until the truth surfaces. If you have any information, go to the show notes to find out how you can contact the local Mounties detachment in Portage. That's it for tonight. And before we go, I want to thank the listener who recommended this case. If you have an idea for the show, post a comment on our YouTube channel and we'll take a look at it for a future episode. See you next Monday, and until then, take care of each other.